What's up everybody, Steven here with Neural DSP. And today I'm going to be breaking down the bass tones used in the latest Artist Tones cover of Periphery's Blood Eagle. Links for the bass presets and the multi-tracks are going to be in the description down below, so let's go ahead and jump into it. So as always, we want to start off by thinking about what Nolly uses for his equipment. Generally, he uses a lot of Dingwall basses and has a signature called the NG2. Also, he's been known to use the Microtube's B7K Ultra from Darkglass. Knowing this kind of information gives us an outline, generally speaking, of what his tone is going to sound like. The bass is going to be bright, articulate, have a nice amount of sustain, as well as a clear amount of saturation on the top end. So keeping that information in mind, I used the Eurobass 2 by Submission Audio for the heavier parts. And then for the warmer, more low gain parts, I used the stems provided by Joao Medeiros, since he used a Fender bass to record this part. He was kind enough to supply all the tracks that he recorded for his own cover that he used on his own channel. Now, some of you may be thinking that, well, Nolly has some of his own presets in these plugins, so why not just use those and call it a day? Well, the real catch to using presets is you'll always have to adjust it for your own source material. So I actually set this up so that way you can hear what the same source is going to go through different presets. I have my own Darkglass and Parallax processing up here. Then there's the Nolly Get Good preset on the Darkglass Ultra. And then finally the Parallax grind tone. Very, very different. Okay, so now let's go ahead and listen to them in the mix. So the first thing I take a look at whenever I'm starting off with a preset is where's my input level, what does my EQ look like, and what impulse responses are being used. You also have to keep in mind what's the overall vision for the rest of the track. Are you looking for something that's going to be more saturated, brighter, warmer, less saturated, more clean, more articulate? These are all factors that are going to have to be thought of when you're dialing in your tone. So for instance, when we take this Darkglass preset, it's very, very low heavy. So what I could do is I can actually take the impulse responses off and see how that sounds like. That actually sounds pretty good. So let's go ahead and mess around with the EQs a little bit. Okay, so that sounds pretty good for what it is. Now, normally if I'm working with the Darkglass, I'll also split my bass into the Parallax's low band on an additional bus, but you can kind of get the gist of what I'm doing to the signal to try and make sure that it fits within the mix. So let's go ahead and move on to the Parallax. So let's listen to this by itself. So it's already a little bit too saturated for my taste on this track. So let's go ahead and mess around again with the impulse response, with the input and the gain settings. Okay, so my approach was there was a lot of saturation on the upper band. So I started off by backing off of the input level, but I wasn't really happy with how far I had to back it off to get that articulation back. So I bumped the input back up to 0 and I started messing around with the drive knobs on the mid and high distortion bands. So I found that sweet spot on the high and the mid drive that allowed for a nice amount of saturation on the signal, but also allowing the articulation of the bass to still come through. You'll notice that I also changed the equalizer to take this high shelf down just a little bit to get rid of some of those kind of papery kind of sounds. And then I moved the impulse responses around. The dynamic 421 tends to be a little present in a couple of areas, so I moved the position over just a little bit, as well as the ribbon 121. And then you saw on the EQ, I took out just a little bit of this kind of muddy frequency, as well as around 4K, just to make sure that that whistly frequency doesn't come through the mix. And then when we listen to the other two tones in context, it should hopefully help them sit more in the mix. And that sounds pretty good to me, so let's go ahead and go through the processing of the heavy bass real quick. So as normal, I have my bass split between two different buses. I have the Parallax taking care of the low-end compression, and then I'm using the Microtube's B7K Dark Glass Ultra as my main bass tone. For the impulse responses on the Dark Glass Ultra, I just went with Dynamic 52A and the Condenser 184, distance and position 0 on both of them. For EQ on the Dark Glass Ultra, I merely just did a high pass at 233 Hz, so that way that inconsistent low end could be replaced by the more compressed, consistent low end of the Parallax. So let's go ahead and take a look at the warm bass before I go through the bus processing, which has more of a top-down approach. On Joao's Bass DI, I used the Corniff Pawn Shop compressor with the Bass Attack preset on. This is mainly just to make the Bass DI a little bit more consistent before it hits the saturation of the plugins. And then I ended up doing some pretty extensive shaping of the Bass DI before it hit the plugins. This Fender DI is very, very warm, so it isn't exactly appropriate. So I went with a little bit more extreme, heavy-handed approach with the EQ to try and kind of muscle that brightness out of it. And then once more, I have the DI going split between the Parallax for the low-end compression and the Dark Glass Ultra as my top-end tone. And you can see that I didn't do too much differently between this and the heavier tone, just kind of backed off the more extreme moves that I made with the high mids and the trebles. I also disengaged the impulse response because with the impulse responses engaged, it just became a little bit too dark for my taste. So you could hear once I disengage the impulse response, you could then hear the articulation of the bass pop out of the mix again. Now, because I made such extreme moves to the DI, I ended up having to correct on the way out just to make sure I got rid of some of these more chirpy kind of frequencies. So now that we got the main tones out of the way, let's go ahead and look at my bus processing. Now to start, I did a little bit of EQ, shaping, and taking care of a couple of treble frequencies. You can see that I got really annoyed with this 3300 frequency area, dipping it almost 12 dB. After the EQ, I thought a little bit of saturation and tone shaping was in order. I ended up using the FabFilter Saturn and using a couple of different saturation types and dynamic shifts along the way. You can see that I really wanted to crunch up this mid-range so that way the bass could really kind of take up that space in the mix. So you can hear that the FabFilter Saturn is actually doing a lot in the way of saturation and brightening up the mix of the bass. After that, I have my track spacer just basically moving the bass out of the way so that way the toms and the kick could take up more of the center of the mix. And then we go on to the final bass bus in which we have some EQ. And then some low-end control and compression. It's probably not even really doing anything in this particular mix. Basically, I just have it there as a safeguard, just in case the low end gets anywhere out of control. Finally, an L1 limiter, again, is probably not doing a whole lot. I just leave it there just so my bass doesn't get a little too out of hand. And that's how I dialed in the bass tone for this Artist Tones cover of Periphery's Blood Eagle. Thank you so much for checking out this video. Links for the bass presets and the multi-tracks are in the description down below. While you're there, leave a like, share, comment, subscribe, and hit that bell icon for notifications on when we upload new content to this channel. Let me know in the comments below if you have any artists or guitar players that you want to see me dial in on this channel. And as always, I'll see you in the next video.